We open with the exciting news that Israeli hostage Qaid Farhan al-Qadi from the Bedouin community, who was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th, has been rescued from his captors in Gaza and returned to Israel. Al-Qadi, who is 52 years old, is a father of 11 who lived near Rahat and worked in a packing house in Kibbutz Magen, from where he was kidnapped. It was reported that he was rescued in a Hamas tunnel where he had previously been held with other captives and was rescued in a complex IDF operation. This is the first hostage to be rescued from a tunnel. Al-Qadi was taken to Soroka Hospital to undergo testing, and initial reports show he is in good health. His return has been met with immense celebration in Israel, as the initial announcement featured moving footage of his family running to greet him at the hospital.
ברוך השם, אנחנו אומרים תודה רבה לכולם, ואני מקווים שלראות אותו בבריאות, ושמחים מאוד שאנחנו מקבלים את הבשורות האלה.
We at ILTV join in the celebrations of welcoming him home and hope to see the return of all our hostages soon. Amid continuing threats of a regional war with Iran or an expanded war with Hezbollah in Lebanon, IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi held key talks with visiting U.S. Commander of the Joint Chief General Charles Brown.
The military leaders of the U.S. and Israel met in the IDF Northern Command, where Halevi said they discussed operational cooperation in the face of challenges and threats in the Middle East.
אנחנו מחזקים את שיתוף הפעולה המבצעי מול האתגרים והאיומים במזרח התיכון. ישראל חזקה ומגנה על עצמה בעצמה, ובכל זאת, תמיד טוב שיש לצידנו בת ברית חזקה שחולקת איתנו ערכים ואינטרסים משותפים.
Halevi said that the IDF will continue hitting Hezbollah hard, and that he was determined to return northern residents to their homes as soon as possible.
אנחנו לא עוצרים. לחיזבאללה יש עוד יכולות, והמלאכה עדיין לא הושלמה. המשימה שלנו היא ברורה, להשיב את תושבי הצפון לבתיהם בביטחון, וצה"ל פועל לשם כך מסביב לשעון. אנחנו נחושים להחזיר את תושבי הצפון לבתיהם בביטחון מהר ככל שניתן.
Defense Minister Gallant met Brown and exited saying that Iranian aggression has reached all-time highs, and Israel and the U.S. needed to advance joint capabilities for all theaters of the war. In a clear reference to Iran and Hezbollah, Brown was asked if the immediate risk of a regional war had declined. Brown said, somewhat yes, adding, you had two things you knew were going to happen. One already happened. Now it depends on how the second is going to play out. The tit-for-tat exchanges renewed between Israel and Hezbollah, but at a much lower rate than in recent days. Hezbollah was mostly on the receiving end. Several suspected drones from Lebanon did impact the Upper Galilee without causing injuries. Fighter jets attacked military structures and terror infrastructure in several towns in South Lebanon. IDF forces also attacked with artillery in the areas of Sheba and Eta el-Shab in South Lebanon. A major Hezbollah retaliation for the Israeli assassination of Hezbollah Chief of Staff Fuad Shukr a month ago is apparently behind us. But the 325-day war of attrition between Israel and Lebanon is continuing.
While following the escalation by Hezbollah and the response by the IDF, it seems a head-to-head conflict with Hezbollah and the IDF is somewhat inevitable after months of endless attacks on the northern border and over 60,000 displaced Israelis from the northern communities. Here to speak with us now about both sides is Israeli-Lebanese analyst and representative for the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office, Jonathan El-Khoury, himself a refugee from Lebanon who now lives in northern Israel. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, you yourself ended up as an Israeli, in part due to this threat of Hezbollah. What can you tell us about the impact of this proxy of the Islamic Republic in Lebanon today?
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me, Emily. As I experienced it myself when I was living inside of Lebanon after Israel's withdrawal in May 2000, when Hezbollah started to occupy south of Lebanon, basically taking over and controlling our lives, making sure that we don't speak against them, making sure that we can't even opposition any of their actions inside of South Lebanon. But what happened is that later on, they infiltrated more inside of the Lebanese politics, inside of Lebanese territories, where de facto Hezbollah today controls some territories in Lebanon that has no Lebanese sovereignty. And this is something that is super crucial for the international community to understand, that at the end of the day, Hezbollah is taking a lot of Lebanese hostage and using them as human shields in order to attack Israel, Israeli citizens. You can say, I fled Hezbollah back in 2001 when I fled to Israel and got shelter in Israel. And today we're facing the same threat that we used to have back then in Lebanon, but now here in Israel.
Now, we've seen approximately 80% of Palestinians support Hamas, even months into this war. How do the Lebanese people feel about Hezbollah as compared to, say, the Palestinians and Hamas?
Yeah, well, the difference is that Lebanon is still somewhat a democratic country, a democratic state, with a vibrant Christian community, Druze community, Sunni Muslim community that not necessarily support Hezbollah, that is a Shia terror group that is affiliated and a proxy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And what happened is that because of this, you can say confliction inside of the Lebanese politics, the majority of the Lebanese people today, we can say for sure, doesn't really support Hezbollah's actions, and Hezbollah is basically dragging Lebanon to war. And we can see that on the ground. Latest surveys that showed after the Lebanese elections in 2022 showed that more than 1 million people in Lebanon and their political leaders opposed Hezbollah going to war with Israel. You can see also their opposition to what they're having internally inside of Lebanon, taking over Lebanese sovereignty, taking over the Lebanese port. We all remember the port blast in August of 2020, where it led to more than 200 Lebanese people to be killed because of Hezbollah keeping their ammunition in Lebanese territories. And this is something that is super crucial to understand, that a lot of Lebanese oppose Hezbollah's affiliation, that at the end of the day, it doesn't really care for the Lebanese people. And we saw that since October 8th, when Hezbollah started firing rockets towards Israel, a lot of Lebanese went out online to say Lebanon against the war, because they don't support anything that Hezbollah does by dragging Lebanon to war.
Now, you're an Israeli citizen living in the north, and once again, you're impacted by this endless Hezbollah rocket fire as an Israeli now. What do you think the IDF needs to do to secure this border and deter Hezbollah?
First of all, I'm really happy to see that the IDF issued an attack on Hezbollah before they launched their massive attack towards the northern of Israel, where they tried to kill as many Israelis as possible. And they were able to destroy hundreds of missiles before they were even launched towards Israel. And this is something that is super important to understand. At the end of the day, the IDF is the Israeli Defense Forces, and it makes everything in its power in order to protect its citizens. And I do believe that it will continue to do so as much as possible, because this is its job, and it's doing it in the highest way possible. But also it's important to understand that at the end of the day, what Hezbollah is doing is not only targeting Israeli civilians, they're targeting our defense systems, because they're not able to actually hit many civilians as they wanted, because that Israel really put a lot of emphasis and a lot of effort and a lot of funding towards its defense systems that protects us as Israelis. And this is something that a lot of Lebanese are seeing it also, and kind of questioning what Hezbollah did throughout the years, because at the end of the day, they didn't really help to assist to protect the Lebanese people, but actually dragging them into war that will lead to their destruction. But it's really important for me to also add that it's not enough that only the IDF itself will protect Israel. The international community needs to join Israel in a joint forces in order to make sure that not only the resolution 1701 that states that Hezbollah needs to stay about 10 kilometers away from the northern border of Israel and across the Litani River inside of Lebanon, but they also should implement resolution 1559 that states that every non-Lebanese government organization can't hold weapons. Hezbollah is not a Lebanese organization. Hezbollah's affiliation is not to Lebanon. Hezbollah now holds more than 200,000 missiles that are targeting Israeli civilians. And the international community needs to make sure, also the Lebanese themselves, with the help of Israel, needs to make sure that Hezbollah is dismantled from these capabilities, because as Israelis, we will never let Hezbollah do that again. And this is something that we learned from October 7th. We will never let October 7th happen again.
All very, very important information. We do have to wrap up, but I just wanted to ask you really quickly, as part of the Arab-Israeli community, I wanted to ask you how the reaction has been thus far to the historic now release, or rescue, I should say, of the hostage Al-Qadi from Gaza.
The release, once I heard about the release of Qaid Farhan Al-Qadi, I was so full of joy, because at the end of the day, you can see that Israel is doing everything in its power to not just protect all of its citizens, but to make sure that every citizen that are also non-Jewish that were taken by Hamas as captives are back home to their families and relatives, because Israel takes care of all of its citizens. And this is something that is super important for people to understand, that at the end of the day, Israel is this amazing mosaic that has more than 25% of it that are non-Jewish. And all of us are being protected today by Israel from terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like Iran, like the Houthis in Yemen, like the Islamic resistance in Iraq, and many others that are threatening, at the end of the day, all of Israelis. And we are joyful to see Qa'id is back home, and we're really praying to see all of the rest of the 108 hostages that were taken on October 7th by Hamas back home as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Amen. Thank you so much for your insights, Jonathan. Incredibly informative. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Both the U.S. and the Islamic Republic have warned Israel not to become complacent, as the Islamic Republic may still be planning a retaliatory attack for the assassination of Hamas leader on Iranian soil. For more on the latest warning, here's ILTV's editor-in-chief, Maayan Hoffman.
U.S. National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby has warned that Israel still faces the potential of a retaliatory attack from Iran or its proxy groups. Speaking at a press briefing on Monday, Kirby emphasized that we have to assume that Iran remains postured and prepared. His statement followed remarks from Major General Mohammad Bagheri of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who warned that Iran will decide how and when to respond to the assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh on its soil last month. Iran has accused Israel of carrying out the attack using a short-range projectile with a 7-kilogram warhead and has vowed severe revenge, though Israel has not confirmed the incident.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران در بازی‌های تحریکات رسانه‌ای و غیر آن نمی‌افتد و خود نسبت به چگونگی و زمان اقدام انقلابی خود تصمیم خواهد گرفت. محور مقاومت نیز هر کدام به تناسب توانمندی‌ها و تدابیر خود این انتقام‌ها را صورت خواهند داد که روز گذشته بخشی از آن را شاهد بودیم.
Kirby told reporters that this situation is why the U.S. is maintaining a very robust force posture in the region. He noted it's a dynamic situation and we have to treat it like that. Meanwhile, the Qatari Prime Minister has met with the Iranian President and Iranian Foreign Minister on Monday. This marked the first official trip to Tehran by a Qatari official since the new Iranian administration took office in July. Qatar is mediating in the regional conflict, working on a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. The visit, of course, also took place amid concerns over a potential Iranian strike against Israel.
Conflicting reports on the progress of the hostage for ceasefire negotiations. While Hamas claims no progress is made, the U.S. is claiming otherwise, while Israel disputes specific concessions on the Philadelphia corridor. The full story here. After the conclusion of the high-level summit on hostage for ceasefire negotiations, which seemed to end with no major progress, an Israeli lower-level negotiating team continued talks on the ground on Monday in Cairo. These negotiations, however, seem to have hit another roadblock. This week, the U.S. claimed that progress was being made in the negotiations, while Hamas claimed the opposite. Hamas has also put forward new demands to the July 2nd framework as rumors circulated that Israel agreed to reduce forces from the Philadelphia corridor, a claim the prime minister flat out denied. These expectations are part of a Hamas demand to reduce troops in the Egypt-Israel buffer zone and to commit to no change in the status quo in the area for the first 42-day phase of the hostage deal, as well as allow Palestinians to return to northern Gaza. Reports from Israel's Channel 12 on Tuesday claimed that the parties have agreed to set aside the issue of the Philadelphia corridor as well as the Netzarim corridor for now to focus on other issues in the negotiations. The Philadelphia corridor has been a major sticking point in hostage for ceasefire negotiations as it secures the border with Egypt that Hamas has used for years, as the IDF recently revealed. Mediators claim the talks are now focusing on securing Israel's ability to veto the release of some Palestinian prisoners under a deal and how many living hostages Israel will get back during its 6-week first phase.
Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, troops continue to fight against Hamas deep in Deir el-Balah, where dozens of terrorists have been eliminated in the last 2 weeks. Fighters from the Yahalom and 603rd Battalion also located and destroyed a Hamas tunnel in the area with a length of 700 meters. Troops of the 202nd Battalion nearby discovered many weapons, including cartridges, anti-tank missiles, vests, and knives, found in a room with a baby crib located in a residential apartment.
Judea and Samaria, the IDF continues targeted operations, eliminating terror operatives. Late last night, the IDF struck a terrorist command room near Tulkarem. More from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
Palestinian media reports that Hamas operative Jibril was among at least 5 people killed in a late-night IDF drone strike on Nur Shams. Jibril, who had a history of explosive device attacks and stone throwing, was released from Israeli prison during the November hostage prisoner exchange. Jibril's father claimed his son had dreamed of entering Al-Aqsa Mosque with the Prophet Muhammad and fighting against the Jews. The IDF confirmed it targeted a command room in Nur Shams near Tulkarem, associated with local terror operatives. The Palestinian Authority's health ministry reported several fatalities from the drone strike. The IDF is expected to provide further details on the operation soon. While Israel's main war fronts are in the north and south, the IDF has also been conducting a targeted elimination campaign against those involved in terrorist activities in Judea and Samaria since October 7th. Those operations have neutralized members of Palestinian terror groups, including Hamas. Analysts have expressed significant concern that Hamas and Islamic Jihad have established a strong presence in the northern territories and are likely to continue launching attacks against Israel.
The Temple Mount is once again at the center of controversy after reports of a proposed state-sponsored tour plan, which some officials deny approving. In addition, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir's recent comments about establishing a synagogue on the site have drawn harsh international criticism and calls for action from Saudi Arabia, the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas. More on this from ILTV's Mayan Hoffman.
The Temple Mount and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir are once again at the center of controversy, both in Israel and internationally. Khan News reports that the Prime Minister's office and the National Security Council have approved a Heritage Ministry plan to launch state-sponsored guided tours of the Temple Mount. If confirmed, this 2 million shekel plan would allow tens of thousands of Jews and hundreds of thousands of tourists to learn about the Jewish heritage of the site with a more historically accurate narrative. The tours are expected to begin after the holiday season. The Heritage Ministry says they have received approval from all relevant authorities. However, the National Security Council denies approving the plan or even being asked to do so, calling any report of its involvement unfounded. The news comes shortly after Ben-Gvir told Army Radio yesterday that he would be interested in establishing a synagogue on the Mount. In response, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated once again that there is no change in the status quo on the Temple Mount. Despite this, the comment sparked harsh reactions. This morning, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Affairs Ministry condemned the statements, emphasizing that Saudi Arabia opposes the extreme statements and provocations. The ministry called for respecting the historic and legal status of the site and urged the international community to address the humanitarian disaster facing the Palestinian people. The Palestinian Authority also called on the international community to pressure Israel to end Ben-Gvir's provocative actions and statements. Hamas went further, urging Palestinians to gather at the site to confront the occupation's plans. Currently, the Temple Mount is under the jurisdiction of the Jordanian Waqf, with security handled collaboratively by Jordan and Israeli police. While Jews and Christians are allowed to ascend the Temple Mount, the status quo prohibits them from openly praying there. In recent years, many religious Zionist activists have pushed to change the policy. However, the ultra-Orthodox community opposes such changes, arguing that Jews are strictly forbidden from ascending the Temple Mount for religious reasons at this time.
Well, following the continued controversy over the Temple Mount, here to discuss with us is Rabbi Stephen Berg, the CEO of Aish. Rabbi Berg, thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to start by getting your take on this recent initiative to potentially bring thousands of visitors to the Temple Mount with government funding. Is this something you would consider a change in the status quo, and how much of an impact do you think it's going to have?
Look, I think people are going up there. I mean, that's not such a change to the status quo. People are going up there. What is a change is prayer up there. And frankly, it's almost surreal to hear people arguing so vehemently against people being able to pray in a holy site. And it's even stranger to hear Saudi Arabia weigh in on it, which frankly doesn't even yet allow Israelis into their country, but yet is trying to dictate what could be done up there. So I don't think it's such a change in the status quo. I think there has to be a conversation how everyone, really everyone, Christians, Muslims, and Jews, could be allowed to pray and to reach out to the Almighty from all the different religions that believe in one God.
Now, I wanted to ask, when it comes to the status quo, should Jewish prayer be banned at the holiest site in Judaism? I mean, do you think that this actually should change?
I actually do think it should change. I think that if someone is up there, because right now if someone is seen mumbling and it's as if they're praying, they can get themselves in trouble. I think that's a little silly. I think it's a little crazy. I think people should have that ability. How the structure works, what should be up there, that's real conversation. But to tell people, you know, I grew up in America, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, that's something that we believe in. And I don't know why we should ban anyone from praying at any place that they really feel they could reach out to the Almighty.
Now, when it comes to Saudi Arabia and the potential of progressing with new peace agreements, what do you make of Ben Gvir's recent statements? I mean, is this unnecessarily inflammatory? Is it something that needs to happen, as you mentioned a second ago? I mean, we've also seen religious leaders condemning Ben Gvir's provocation.
Look, I think we have to separate the issue from Ben Gvir and how they kind of view him as a politician and someone who may sometimes be an instigator versus what the issue is here. And as I've said before, I was recently in Saudi Arabia about a year ago, and I was in Bahrain. I went to Saudi, and I had to leave all of my Israeli friends behind because they couldn't come into Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of issues to be discussed here in terms of Saudi Arabia. But I think the issue, again, has to be separated. He's bringing up an issue, and I think we have to separate that and say, can there be prayer? Is there a way to make this happen? Is there a way for all of us to come together and be able to worship? And it's really sad when people threaten and say, well, if people come to worship, then there's going to be violence. What in the world does that mean? When in the world should prayer lead to violence? I think that's a premise that we shouldn't accept. But again, I think there has to be conversation before you shift anything. You have to really make sure you're covering all bases. But we all remember what happened when Ariel Sharon opened up the Kotel tunnel tours. I mean, there was rioting, but for what? And I think we have to really push back and say, why are you doing this? We all want to come together in prayer, and it should be a place of unity, not a place of distrust.
It is interesting that Saudi Arabia, of all countries, is against this when, in fact, the Abraham Accords, the whole premise of the Abraham Accords is that these Abrahamic faiths have a shared vision. But I will close with this question. In the event that there is actually a change in the status quo, what do you expect to see from both the international community and from the Arab world?
What I would hope to see is coming together of Christians, Muslims, and Jews and saying that we should all be able to pray. I always tell people that Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, where my office is, I mean, I look down the Temple Mount all the time, is a place for every human being in the world to be able to come and join in prayer. And we all have to be mature enough to allow each other to have that space. That's what I'd like to see. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is a lot of politics getting involved here and all kinds of threats thrown around. And we have to be able to separate religion and reaching out to the Almighty from the politics of trying to get along.
Absolutely. Well, Rabbi Stephen Berg, I want to thank you for your time and for your insight today.
Thank you. God bless.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with lows of around 26 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we will see mostly sunny skies and hot weather. Expected top temperatures seeing highs of about 33 degrees Celsius or 87 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For all the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.